As the old man left the cemetery, a dusty carriage stopped nearby, indicating it had traveled a long distance. Ibarra dismounted with his aged servant and waved away the carriage, gravely heading toward the cemetery. "My illness and my duties kept me from returning," the servant said timidly. "Capitan Tiago promised to make a niche for the grave, but I managed to plant some flowers and set up a cross I carved." Ibarra did not respond as they entered the graveyard. The servant pointed toward a spot behind a large cross. Ibarra was preoccupied, failing to notice the surprised glances from people recognizing him. He carefully walked around the graves, now filled with respect for the place where his father rested. When they arrived at the large cross, Ibarra looked around, troubled. His companion searched the ground but found no cross. "Was it here?" he mused. "No, over there. But the ground has changed." With anguish in his eyes, Ibarra listened to the servant's recollection of a stone that marked the grave, and how a farmer had to dig it because the gravedigger was ill. They approached the gravedigger, who respectfully removed his hat as they approached. "Can you point out the grave that had a cross?" asked the servant. The gravedigger thought for a moment. "A big cross?" he asked. "Yes, a big one," the servant confirmed eagerly, trying to communicate with Ibarra using his eyes. "A carved cross tied with rattan?" the gravedigger continued. "That's it," the servant said excitedly, drawing the shape of the cross in the dirt. "Were there flowers on it?" "Yes. Oleanders, tuberoses, and forget-me-nots," the servant added joyfully, offering the gravedigger a cigar. "Please tell us where the grave is and what happened to the cross." The gravedigger scratched his head before yawning. "I burned it." "Burned it? Why?" Ibarra asked, stunned. "Because the fat curate ordered me to do so," the gravedigger replied casually. "Who is the fat curate?" Ibarra inquired. "The one who beats people with a big stick," the gravedigger replied. Ibarra rubbed his forehead. "But you can at least tell us where the grave is?" The gravedigger smiled and said, "The corpse isn't there anymore." "What do you mean?" the servant exclaimed in disbelief. "Not long after the burial, the curate made me dig up the body and move it to the cemetery for the Chinese. I tried, but it was heavy and it was raining." He trailed off, noticing Ibarra's anger. Ibarra, visibly upset, grabbed the gravedigger's arm. "Did you really do that?" he asked, his voice full of disbelief. "Don't be mad, sir," the gravedigger stammered. "I didn't bury him with the Chinese. We'd be better off drowning than being with them, so I dumped the body in the lake." Ibarra stared at him, his emotions boiling over. "You are just a miserable slave," he shouted, stepping away as if in a daze, treading on graves as he left. The gravedigger, muttering to himself, complained about the trouble caused by the dead and how he worried about losing his job. Ibarra walked away with a distant look in his eyes, followed by the weeping servant. As the sun set, dark clouds gathered in the eastern sky, and a dry wind rustled the trees. Ibarra, bareheaded, felt the weight of grief and rage but did not cry or sigh. He moved quickly, bypassing familiar sights, until he spotted his old house, surrounded by cacti and inviting him with its open windows. However, he ignored its welcoming signs, fixated instead on the figure of a priest approaching from the opposite direction. It was the curate of San Diego, Fray Salvi, wearing a serious expression. When they met, Ibarra stopped and stared at him. As Ibarra stepped closer, he firmly placed his hand on the priest's shoulder, demanding, "What did you do with my father?" Pale and frightened, Fray Salvi struggled to respond. "I did nothing to your father," he stammered. "You didn't?" Ibarra retorted, pressing him down harder. "No, it was my predecessor, Padre Damaso," the priest pleaded. Realizing the depth of the situation, Ibarra stepped back and slapped his hand on his forehead in frustration, then turned away to hurry home. The old servant rushed to help Fray Salvi to his feet.